Hey, Gracebased families. This is Megan Hunt. I'm here co-hosting this podcast for the next 8 episodes with Cody Kimmel, and we're talking about what grace-based parenting looks like in action. We're talking about connection and correcting our kids. I'm a mom of 6 myself. I'm from Ruston, Louisiana, and I'm a first grade teacher, a foster mom, and I'm a practitioner of TBRI, trust-based relational intervention. And all those things kind of help me to be able to figure out what parenting really looks like in times where kids are not obeying, we're frustrated, we're overwhelmed. What does grace-based families really look like in action? So if you identify with me in any of those ways, you need to listen to these episodes because they're going to give you a lot of hope and a lot of practical tools for parenting your kids with grace.
Welcome to the Gracebased podcast. My name is Cody. I'm the executive director of Gracebased, and I am here with Megan Hunt. She has been joining us for the last, this is our 8th episode. We've been talking about just the power of building strong connections with our kids, why that's important in raising them, and how that helps us when it comes time to correct them. We spent a lot of time talking about understanding our own attachment styles and understanding our own maybe areas of growth to feel secure when we address our kids and work with our children. We talked about how we can help them regulate through hard moments, how we can help maintain connection through play and through scaffolding to give them hope. We've talked about all these things. I think I'm doing an okay job.
Yeah, you got it.
And we've even started to talk about the nature of correction. How do we maybe prevent blow-ups? How do we kind of get ahead of things? And then when things do go wrong, which they will, how can we correct them in a way that is not punitive, that is not punishing them, but actually disciplining them forward? And so we talked a little bit in the last episode about this, and you talked about redos and talked about different things that we can do, some really great parenting tools that can de-escalate blow-ups, that can give appropriate consequences where they need to be, and really, and sometimes mitigate the need for a harsher consequence through redos. However, we know that redos and a gentle, like, hey, why don't you try that again, does not always work. And
Which they did.
Yeah, if a redo worked every time,
We'd be the best parents in the world.
And I will say redos work a lot of the times. And that's from somebody who did not used to do redos. We learned about this. We started trying it, and it really was a life-changing thing. But that doesn't always happen. And so how do we take all of this knowledge that you've shared, that we've been discussing, and apply it in the situation to where we can still be correcting with grace? We can still be correcting in a way that leads to connection when redos and maybe some of our gentler things don't work.
Yeah. Well, I think that leading with connection is the number one thing we want to remember, that we should never correct without connecting with our kids. So it's going to be very difficult for a correction to be successful if we don't have a connection with the child.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important, as we talked about in previous episodes, for us to have a strong connection and relationship with our child, so that when we get into these moments, we're walking in with the best foot forward.
Yeah.
So as you know, I'm a mom of 6. I'm a teacher, and I am a TBRI practitioner.
Yes.
So that stands for trust-based relational intervention. And that's the model that's attachment-based, research-based, that is really effective for parenting and coaching kids who have experienced trauma. And what's essential for those kids is excellent for all kids. So a lot of the tools and frameworks that I use in my own home as a mom really spring from that. And so one of the models that they talk about that's been really helpful is talking about our levels of engagement with our children when we get to a conflict. And what it talks about really is that idea of gentleness, only using the level of engagement necessary in order to get the problem solved.
That's so good.
That is just so key.
Yeah.
That I would not escalate my response beyond what the behavior warrants.
Yeah.
So I think of it kind of like a step stool. So when I have a child that is having a behavior, I'm going to step stool up the levels of engagement of my strategies I'm going to use, and then I'm going to step them back down.
Yeah.
So our goal is that we would end on the floor. So when I think about those levels of the step stool, the first level is playful. So I'm going to try to be playful to engage that child so that they would come back, de-escalate. Okay, a lot of times that will work. I'd say 80% of the time. If playful doesn't work, I'm going to step up to the next step, and that would be structured. That would be giving them a choice or being very specific about what I need them to do. I change my tone. I'm more specific. And then if that works, then I go back to playful and then back and our feet are back on the floor. And in some cases, even after I'm playful, I give them some choices and I'm making sure that they understand what I need them to do, then it might still escalate. And then the child is in a full-blown, they've lost it. And so that's when we would say they need calming engagement. And then my attention shifts from giving them choices or talking at them. It shifts to simply calming them down so that they can think again. And so we know, we've talked about this in previous episodes, that when our brains become dysregulated, our cortisol is flooding our brain. It is as if the prefrontal cortex of our brain that is responsible for problem solving and empathy and critical thinking, it cannot even be accessed. It is like our lid has been flipped and all we can do is that fight or flight response. And so in that instance, any amount of reasoning or talking or directions is not even going to go in. So our goal at that point is to calm our child down, and then when they're calm, then we can go back to structured and give them some choices and then return to playful. So that sounds kind of abstract, but I want to be able to talk through some different examples of what that might have looked like.
I think that it makes total sense, but I think it's helpful to have some imagination of what does that actually look like in the moment. Like
absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times, when we see this train, I say like the trains starting to go off the tracks, where you're like, okay, this is not going a good way. Then we need to start with being playful, right? If I've got a kid that I say, hey, come over here, and they ignore me and walk away. I go, okay, my red flags start to go up. Like, this could be a thing. I'm first going to resort to playfulness. I might be like, yoo-hoo, come over here. Something to like, I'm being silly, but like, I actually mean like, come over here.
But
a lot of times the child will be like, all right, I'll do it. And then your problem is solved. I don't have to go through a huge lecture of like, when I call you, you come over here. My problem is solved. They actually did what I wanted them to do. If that doesn't happen, then I level up. Okay. I can say, hey, I need you to come stand right by me within 2 seconds. Like, come over here right now. And you're going to see really clearly whether they're going to do it or not do it. Right. And the level of intensity that we give with what we need them to do is dependent on who they are and what the situation is. So I might say to a child, like, I need you to come over here within 2 seconds right now. Or I might say something like, hey, you need to come to me or you need to go back to where you were sitting, right? Give a choice. And then when you're able to kind of gauge, are they going to obey? Are they going to do it? You're just leveling up your intensity and you're giving them a direction that they need to follow. And then once they do that, then we can return to like, okay, good. Well, I thought you didn't hear me. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for listening.
So kind of that step up. The moment you get what you need there,
you step right back down. And the returning to playfulness helps them to know that we're still in connection with each other.
Kind of disarms them, the whole thing.
That's right. And then if that doesn't work, then we see a child that might start, an escalated child that might need a calming engagement, might be somebody that's like, no, I'm not doing it. Or their voice starts going. They might start swiping stuff off of counters, kicking things. That's when we know, all right, this is not about you coming over here anymore. This is about me simply getting you into a calming place where you can be thinking about it. So I might need to say like, hey, let's take a walk for a second, and then we'll revisit this in a minute. So, stepping up and down helps us to know I'm trying to get the behavior changed. That's my goal.
Yep.
My goal is that we would both be okay at the end of this interaction, that the behavior would be changed, and that we would remain connected. And that looks a lot different for different age groups of kids.
Yeah.
I just had this example with my 2-year-old right before I got on the plane to come here. And we were having some words about putting on his pajamas.
Right.
And he got out of the bathtub and I'm like, it's time to put on your pajamas. No.
He didn't want to. Yeah.
Didn't want to. And I was like, look, well, first I stopped and I was like, okay, is it essential that he puts on his pajamas?
Yeah.
I asked myself, can I let this one go?
Yeah.
But I thought also, I think he's going to be cold. Like,
Yeah.
I think he's going to want pajamas. So I was like,
there's a legitimate reason that you would want
is
him
this
to do
a worthy
versus another
fight?
thing. Yep. Totally.
I got to ask myself this.
Yep.
Is this worth all of this?
Yep.
And I decided that it was. And so I was like, come on, it will be fun. Let's go. You can pick them.
Yep.
I'm trying to be playful. Like, look at all these choices.
Yeah.
Which ones do you want? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, all right, I'm going to start leveling up here. I'm going to start giving him some choices. So I picked out some elephant pajamas and some dinosaurs. And I'm like, here are your pajamas. We're going to put them on. Which ones do you want? Elephants or dinosaurs? And he's like, no fence, no dinos. I'm like, no fence. I'm like, well, okay then. So he's leveling up back to me. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
It's going to be fun.
Yep. So I'm like, okay, do you want to put the pants on first or the shirt on first? And he was like, no shirt, no pants.
You're not
I'm
tricking
like,
me. Not this one. Yep.
Yeah. And so then this was a bad moment.
Yeah.
I was like, it's time to put them on. Either you choose or I choose. And nothing. So I was like, we're wearing dinosaurs and we're putting pants. Well, I start putting his foot in and then the flailing.
Yeah.
The kicking, the flailing. And I was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
He got so upset and so escalated. I instantly was like, well, now we're in a huge fight. I was upset. He was upset. But that was a moment that I'm like, I don't need to keep wrestling these pajamas on this baby. I need to stop because I need him to be in a thinking place.
Yep.
He needs to be calm. So I took the pajamas off and I was like, okay, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So in that moment, I took him out of the room. We walked, we looked outside the window. He was screaming, arching, flailing his back. My whole goal at that point is calm. We got a drink of water. And then as we were walking back up the stairs, I said, Sincere, it's time to put on our pajamas. Are you going to choose the dinosaurs or the elephants? And he had fun. And he said, dinosaurs. I'm like, okay. Are you going to put the pants or the shirt? And he said, pants. And I said, great. And so we put the pants on. He's calm. And then I started to put the shirt on and he started to re-escalate. And I was like, oh no. Ooh. Yeah. And then I asked myself again, okay, is this important? And I decided at that point, I'm just going to let it go. We started reading a book. We were calm. He had no little pajama shirt. And then you know what? 2 minutes later, he's like, I want my shirt.
Yeah, because it's maybe cold.
Because he's cold.
Yeah.
And so we put it back on.
In the first place. Yeah.
And then when we're done, I'm like, look, that's so nice. They're so soft. You look so good. You're ready for bed.
Yeah.
Well, that was I felt proud of myself in that moment. But I have to be honest with you.
Yeah.
He was still mad at me.
Yeah.
Because I had tried to shove his feet in those pajamas. And so I think the important part that I know we're going to talk about more today is what happens after.
Yes.
We do such a good job de-escalating and we get everybody calm. But there's like a missing piece because I could look at his face and see like he was still mad at me.
Yeah.
So I had to make it right with him and say, buddy, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Because I know that I was mad at you because I was so frustrated you wouldn't put on your pajamas. But I know I was too harsh with you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so sorry. Mommy still loves you.
Yeah.
We're okay. He gave me a hug and it felt like complete.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we're both still good. And so I think that repairing after we have these correcting moments sometimes is just as important as the actual correcting moments themselves.
Well, yeah. And I mean, as we've talked through all of this, the goal in walking our kids towards adulthood to become secure adults who are capable and healthy and able to live life is to do it in a manner of connection. That the way we do it is not to be perfect, not to have but to be at least connected and present with them as they go through it. What's going to happen is in those moments of correction, there will be many fractures. There is a moment where inevitably that connection is broken a little bit. And so what it sounds like you're saying, and what I think is going to be really important for us to kind of close with, is that how do we then close that cycle back? That correction is a moment, but the place we live and should live is in the space of connection. So how do we move from, whether it's a big blow up, little thing, all this stuff, what are the steps we can take? How do we handle even our own mess ups and make sure we get back to a place of connection?
Yeah, I think the first thing we have to do is just take stock of what happened and take ownership of what happened. And sometimes that means sitting down just in a moment and being like, okay, did I really say that? Like, or what just happened here? And pausing long enough to be able to acknowledge what happened. And some of it might be like, okay, actually, I think I did a good job. I think I did everything right. This is how this child responded. This is how it went down. And then acknowledging that the person is still the most important thing in this interchange, is that my relationship with that person. And so some of that for me just looks like giving a moment, giving a break. With my teenagers or my bigger kids, sometimes they need a little bit more time, and I can just circle back. It might look like a knock on their door saying like, hey, can I talk to you about what happened earlier? And then just going in and sitting on their bed and saying like, hey, you know, when you did this thing, I was really frustrated with you. And then waiting, letting them say, yeah, well, I was really frustrated with you about this, or I didn't think. So it's that freedom to be candid. You're inviting kids in a respectful way to talk to you about what happened and meeting them on a real level. And then sometimes that's when it's not a lecture, but you can go back in and say, you know, gosh, I really need you to do this different next time. And this is why. And sometimes it means saying sorry for the things that were hurtful, but sometimes it just means talking it through again at a time of non-conflict when nobody is escalated or heated, and you can look at it in a different light. And sometimes part of that means making a plan for next time. Like if a kid is really upset because of something that went down, maybe there's a way to prevent it in the future that child could say, or that we could even identify. For my kid with the pajamas, maybe I should have talked to him about it earlier and put those pajamas next to the bathtub. So he knew I'm wrapping his mind around it. We get a little bit smarter as parents every time that we coach and correct. And I feel like I'm never going to stop learning how to be a better mom to my kids. But so much of that is me just being intentional about thinking about what happened and then being willing to go back again and make sure that I am remaining connected to those kiddos.
You know, one thing that I find in those moments that is so powerful is oftentimes the connection after those repair moments, it's not just a return to what we were before. It's actually an improvement from what we were before, because in those moments, it's kind of giving an opportunity for them to feel heard, them to feel seen. You know, one of the things that I have found that was a really hard part for me in repair things is, you know, and this is just an example for me, I'm not necessarily somebody who has a hard time owning mistakes. Like I recognize it, I can do it. It's not a big deal for me to do that. I'm not saying, like, not trying to toot my own horn. That's not the hard part about it. The hard part is when I will hear what they thought was bothering them, and I'll think it through. I'm like, well, that's a real stupid thing to like that's that. Yeah. I'm like, that emotion doesn't match what happened. And I don't think what you're saying about me is fair. Like, I'm willing to own what I did wrong, but I don't think what I did was wrong there. But even in those moments, what I've had to learn is for one, it's not helpful at that time to then relitigate it and be like, actually, your feelings are really wrong. It's taking a step back in those moments and allowing myself the space to say, like, even if maybe I don't think that was an appropriate response to it, that feeling is real. And at the heart of it is a choice for me to respect and take that feeling seriously and own it, you know? And sometimes it means eating a little crow, you know? Sometimes it means maybe me kind of granting a little bit more grace in that moment. But that's one of those things for me is like those repair moments, there are times maybe to talk through things, but there can also be a danger in those moments where if you don't come in there with some humility.
Yeah, it can re-escalate things for sure.
To re-escalate things, which almost does more damage, and you're just gonna have to do
Yeah.
way
And so I
more
think
repair.
depending on the situation, depending on the child that you're
Oh,
working
totally.
with, I have a couple of kids that repair has to be really short and sweet. And I
Yep.
really cannot rehash what happened. I
Yep.
just have to say, hey, buddy, you know I love you and I'm always going to be here for you. I'm your mom.
Yep.
And no matter what you do, I'm never going to stop loving you. And sometimes that's all it is because I know if I'm like, hey, I'm sorry I did this. You really should be sorry you did that.
Yeah.
Telling someone that they really should be sorry for something, in my opinion, has been not very successful.
Yeah.
But,
I don't think it's.
But sometimes part of that cycle
Yeah.
of helping kids know how they can fix things is asking like, hey, how are we going to fix this? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are we going to do to make
Yes.
this better? And allowing them to kind of be a part of that process rather than us saying like, I think you really need to say sorry to so-and-so. Saying like, well, what do you think you're going to do to make this better?
Yeah.
Or if I've wronged them, what can I do to make this better?
Yeah.
So modeling that a little bit, I think is really good too.
Well, and it is, when we talk about just the larger scheme of discipline, it is a chance for us to model what this can look like in healthy ways. Because let's face it, our kids are not the only people we are in conflict with sometimes. Like, there's conflict in other areas of life, whether that's with spouse, whether that's, with friends, family, work, stuff like that. And that's going to be true for them as they get older.
Yeah.
That they're going to have to navigate conflict as adults.
Yes.
And helping them learn what that conflict can look like, how to resolve that conflict, modeling that is a form of discipline and
really
a form of grace.
It's coaching, and it's a lot of we're just practicing what we've taught them ahead of time that they need to do. And it's neat to see that lived out with your children when they're having conflict with cousins or even with teachers. One of my children was having a really hard time with one of her teachers being really harsh.
Yeah.
And she was able to go to that teacher graciously and say, hey, it really is hurting my feelings when you're using that tone of voice with me. Like, are you upset with me? And the teacher was like, no, I didn't even know that I was being harsh. And she said, well, it really is hurting my feelings. And the teacher was able to say like, I'm so sorry. That's not been my intention. But watching her live that out and be able to communicate in a respectful way how she was feeling rather than like let that come out in behavior is one of the positive side effects to us having these restorative conversations because we can kind of say, hey, what that happened was not good, but this is a better way to do it. Or even sometimes point out what they did do right. A lot of times I can say like, hey, you know what? You did a really good job of calming down. In my son's room, we have a poster that's like how to calm down. And so when he's in an escalated moment and he's in his room with me and I'm helping him calm down and he's actually looking at the poster later in that repair conversation, I can say, I know you got really upset about this, but you use those tools like a boss.
And you did a great job.
You did a great job. And I'm really proud of that because I don't know if you could have done that. So looking for those things that we can say like, hey, good job here. Let's keep working on that because they're going to need those tools as adults.
Yes. And kind of speaking to that in those repair moments, because I really do think those repair moments are some of the most important and oftentimes sweetest times of parenting, but they can also open ourselves up for sometimes doing more damage, whether that's minimizing what they're doing or another way that can play out is we use that time as like a lecture time of like, well, let me tell you now, this is how this should have gone. And this is why. And like, I've been a college professor before. I like to lecture. That's one of my favorite things to do. And so that was something I really had to work really hard on instead of just going through all this stuff. And sometimes I'd give these great lectures and I'm like, why aren't my kids just
why didn't they get this?
Why don't they understand this? So what is maybe an alternative in those moments where our gut maybe is to lecture or let's let this be a learning experience and this is why and all this stuff. What's maybe a different tactic we can do that can maybe still teach them stuff, help them along, that doesn't feel, I guess, like this authority figure with power coming down on somebody because what it ultimately feels is condescending. And I think that's what we don't want to happen.
Well, I would say like just limit it to 3 or 4 words.
Okay.
Like if you can succinctly say like, hey, next time, be gentle.
Yep.
Like, remember, we're going to use our words.
Yep.
Some of those, and I mean, maybe that's for a younger child, but even for an older child, I might just say like, yeah, our words really are powerful.
Yep.
The end.
Yep.
And if I can tell myself, like, I mean, I told you before, I use Post-its like it's my job.
Yeah.
But I think like if there's like one little Post-it, and it doesn't need to be like a don't hit, but like, hey, it's better if it's framed in terms of this is what you should do instead. This is the behavior or the mindset that you need to put in your mind. And I think we have to be really discerning about if that's the right time to give it.
Yeah.
Honestly, and it might be like during that repair moment, we're not talking about it again, but it's later that we say, hey, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to practice.
Yeah.
We're going to practice responding to me when, when I call your name.
Yeah.
We're going to practice what this looks like.
Yeah.
So just giving yourself notes for next time about, I always kind of keep in my Bible, I have a little note of like, what are the areas of character development that I still see that I need in my kids? I kind of always am like, okay, this one needs some courage.
Yeah.
This one needs to be brave and willing to try hard things.
Yeah.
This one needs a little bit more self-control, whatever it is. And I think those moments, if we can kind of file those away and even put a little note like, okay, this episode of behavior really showed that this child lacked self-control.
Yeah.
And so that's another evidence that I need to find ways to develop self-control in this child and kind of think about it as a loop towards the proactive teaching that we go for. And, we have like broad zones of teaching that we're teaching all of our kids self-control.
Right.
We're teaching all of our kids kindness.
Yep.
But I think with some of our kids, we can see a special bent towards this is going to be hard for them.
Yep.
And they're going to need a little bit of extra support in this. And I might have to do a little bit of one-on-one training or practice ahead of time. And so maybe filing it away to that. And then, another thing I do is I tell my kids what we're working on.
Yeah.
So we had for a long time on one of our bulletin boards in our house, we talked about all the character qualities and everyone chose one for themselves. And mom and dad chose one for them that we were going to pray over them and try to help them coach in.
That's great.
And so, Elizabeth might have said she chose for herself maybe self-control and we chose for her like boldness or something. And so we would choose a verse that spoke to that. And then she would look for evidence. And we would be especially looking for evidence when she did those things. Like, hey, you know what? I saw that when we were at that buffet at school, you only picked up one cookie. And I know you wanted to get a handful.
Yep.
But that was really good evidence of self-control. Your brain told your body no. So that for me is like the evidence of like self-control. Great job. You did that. Way to go. And then so kind of just being intentional and saying, this is where I want to aim. And I know that's something that your dad was so explicit about with the house model is aiming your kids in the right direction and then consistently checking. Are they still, going
that way?
The right way?
Yeah.
And it's if we are, checking our kids just like a cruise ship that's set on a course, even 1 degree off can make a huge distance in where you end or difference in where you end up. So just constantly checking, am I still on course?
Right.
And if I'm not, just course correcting a little bit because without that consistent checking in on how are we doing, then we might end up in a totally different place than we intended to be. And it's just because we weren't checking up. So I see every discipline opportunity is a checkup. Right. How are they doing with these things? And where do I need to kind of course correct to keep them going in the right direction?
No, I love that. And what I think will be interesting in what I have seen with my own parenting is, like you said, you will start to see trends in kids. And what I have found in productive repair moments when I've had with them is in a moment of calmness, with love, with humility, there are times when you can narrate a little bit into them, maybe some language of things they're struggling with that are hard to them, that they might not be able to fully articulate. So like I can say like, hey, I can tell that when you feel left out, for example, this is how you oftentimes respond to this. Or I can tell that really maybe owning up to your mistakes can be really hard and you struggle with that. And I understand that. I can relate to that. Like that's something I struggle with too, or I know plenty of people who struggle with that. And you can kind of start to do that. And it speaks a little bit to the attunement idea.
It does. It really does.
But you can do that. And what I have found in those moments, that almost frees them up more and saying like, yes, for one, you're paying attention to me.
Yeah,
You know
that's
something
right.
about
You
me
noticed
that
me.
that maybe I didn't think people noticed about me. But it also then gives this launching point to say, okay, now let's reflect on that. Let's figure out how can we maybe handle this differently? Because you're right, it doesn't feel good to feel left out.
Yeah.
For
What are
example,
you
like,
going to do when
yeah,
this happens?
yeah,
Not that like it's not going to happen, but
exactly.
it is probably going, it's not like a shark attack where you may
Yeah,
or may
yeah.
not experience it. Feeling left out is something in your life you are going to experience.
Yes.
So what is your response? And a lot of times I talk to my kids too about them
Yeah.
being in control of their feelings, and that their feelings and their actions need to be can be different from each other. You can feel something, but don't necessarily let that dictate your actions. Feeling left out, feeling sad is valid.
Yes.
But then what are we going to choose to do? And like I said, I'm big on like, let's write it down.
Yeah.
Let's make a plan. And sometimes kids don't have an idea about what to do.
Right.
Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And you say, okay, well, what are some ideas? Well, we tried, kicking and screaming. That
Right,
didn't
yeah.
work. That's
Yeah.
a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like, what are some other responses that we think might be productive? And then how do we identify that that's what's happening?
Yes.
And then start to identify like, hey, I think you might be feeling a little left out.
Yeah.
And then that activates like, ding, now I'm going to now I know what to do. I'm going to use my words to say this. I'm going to, whatever it is that they need, you've decided that they're going to do when they're feeling a certain way. And that does help. That's part of that proactive teaching. So it is a cycle. We know that we're going to return from a conflict with a plan for next time and a relationship that is intact so that it's ready. They're ready to be coached again by us.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the goal. Like, right, where it's not just that we feel good and calm and confident, that we move it to the point where we can tell that they are like fully repaired, fully ready, and connected in a place where they're ready to be coached.
And then they're able to do this outside of your home, outside of your family. Like, we've been talking a lot about conflict between a parent and child, but we know as parents, there's plenty of conflict between siblings that we're helping them navigate, giving them the words to say. And so many times I will say, okay, it sounds like you need to say this to your sister. Maybe you want to say this back. And then we're kind of helping them facilitate that. But then they're going to eventually take that outside of our walls. They're going to have conflict with cousins. They're going to have conflict with neighbors at school, friends. They're going to be teenagers that are having conflict with coworkers and things like that. And so we're setting them up for success. And then our goal eventually is to release them to be able to do this independently and to be able to identify that they are having a conflict and how to work through it. And I think that's our ultimate goal as parents, right? That's what being a grace-filled parent is all about, is not just coaching and parenting our kids when they're in our home, but giving them the tools so that as they launch into the world, they're able to navigate that and their relationships with other people with the same kind of grace and developing the same kind of connection that we cultivated when they were in our home.
Hey, this is Joe from Guatemala. Gracebased makes free resources for parents, thanks to the generosity of listeners like me. To join in the work of transforming generations of families, go to gracebased.com/join.